Hey everybody, and welcome back. Well, as you can see, things have moved along a little bit since last week when we made the swinging arm. So this week we're going to start on the frame, and I'll go through that in a couple of minutes. Nothing much happening. Snow's virtually gone. It's raining at the moment, you might be able to hear. And although it's still freezing on a night, it's I think about 65 yesterday. It's very nice. So anyway, what was I saying? Nothing much to report. Might have some comments to mention at the end of the video, but strangely enough, the last couple of weeks they've just been individual questions, so I've just answered them in the comments. Alright, so what are we going to do today? Well, I put this together because I wanted to look at some rough measurements. I've set the wheels to 52 inches. I don't know exactly where it's going to be, depending on the frame. I've set the forks to 24 degrees, which is what I want them to be at the end. And the engine here is, I've put the wheels on wood. So the wheels are basically at the height they're going to be, or the wheel spindles anyway. See, almost 14 inches. That's possibly slightly more than they're going to be, because they're normally about 13 and a half. A 21 inch wheel with a 3 inch or 2.75 trials tyre and a 4 by 18 rear tyre lifts them up about, well, you can imagine 18 inch rear rim is 9 inches radius, and then you've got about 4 inches of tyre which squishes down a little bit, so it's 13 inches. Same here, you've got 21, so that's 10 and a half, and about 3, 13 and a half, so they're almost the same. So we're fine for just putting them on the same height each end. Here we're not going to have bottom tubes, so we're just going to slightly below there, and that's giving us 10 and a half inches now unloaded. I can always slip a piece of wood under this, lift it up, but with it being a heavy engine, even with the alloy barrels on it, I don't want it too high in the frame. Now, one time with trials bikes, say I guess in the 80s, ground clearance was everything. People were putting them really high, and very much it was a matter of technique. I've noticed watching videos of the trials at home, particularly the Yorkshire pre-65 ones. What do you call that chap that does them all? Oh God, his name will come to me. The number of times I've watched them in streams and in rocky areas, squirming their way around rocks where they're worried about ground clearance and the width of the engine. And honest to God, it would be easier to go over, even on a 350. Like I've been out on the Enfield before the winter came. It's just a matter of technique. So if I get 9 inches of ground clearance, something like that, believe me, it's going to be enough, particularly for what this bike is going to be used for. So I don't want to lift the engine up too high. I want to keep the centre of gravity as low as I can. That and the footrest placements are going to be far more important than having lots of ground clearance or a really narrow engine. We can't change much here, but I know I had a couple of comments when I built the Enfield about using the shorter crank, the pre-alternator one, to get the slightly thinner primary chain case at the front. But to be honest, for the sake of saving maybe 1.5 inches in width, I got rid of a magneto and put electronic ignition on. The difference in weight and the much better reliability of the electronic ignition far outweigh, to me, losing even a couple of inches of width. Because as I say, you think what you're doing and you look at some of these rocks and logs and stuff like that, you don't have to try and weasel around them. Anyway, that's by the by. So what we're going to do now is start on the frame, and we're going to do the frame in stages, because I've got a plan how I want to set this up. I wanted the swinging arm done because I could put it on now, because with the engine stood there with the swinging arm on, I can work out exactly on this one where I want the swinging arm mount to be. So I'm not going to follow Charlie's Otter BSA dimensions exactly. It may turn out that they're spot on right for this, I don't know. But before I weld on the swinging arm mount, I want to know it's not going to be too high or low for the chain line for where I want the engine to be. Alright, so let's go over and look at the drawings and see how we're going to do the first piece of the frame. Well, there were a couple of things I mentioned, so I'll just tell you quickly. And sorry for the noise of the rain on the metal roof, but it's either put up with that or I can't film what I'm working on and you won't get a video this week. Alright, two things. First of all, my course. You'll notice I put my black one instead of my brown one because it was mentioned that the brown one was looking a bit grubby, so it's in the wash. But be advised, when you see it next time after it's been washed, it'll look basically just the same. It is well stained. Alright, the other thing is I got those Igus bearings which we're going to use on the next bike, and they came in a little package, and then a couple of days later I got another box and it said Igus on it. So I was a little confused, and when I opened it up, this was inside, and you don't get this from many companies nowadays. It's sort of a salesman's pack, the type of demonstrator thing. It's got all of their products, different types of bearings, all sorts of strange things that they make. I love this one. They seem to use glass of some sort as their bearings. But look at this. I mean, you can't feel it, but it's completely frictionless. And then inside the lid, there's a little thing that tells you what they all are. That's a Drylin SD lead screw. Very nice stuff. Very good from them. So there you go. As I say, a rarity nowadays. Right. Let's get on and quick look at the drawing so I can explain what we're going to do with the frame. Right, back to our drawing with its dimensions. Okay, we've done the swinging arm. So the next thing we're going to do is this part of the frame here. The seat pillar, the top tube and the headstock. Now I'm going to make all three of these out of 1 3/4 inch chromoly. This and this a 16th inch wall. That is 1/8 inch wall because, as you'll see, I chose that because it suits the bearings, and there will also be, of course, a bearing cup sort of thing welded onto each end. Now, using 1 3/4 for all three means that we can make this part laid down on the table. So you'll see that get done, and then we can put the bracing pieces in here, and we can put, as I say, the bearing carriers on there. Then we can go to the next stage. Now, I'm not going to put this piece in at this point because of those exhausts. Right, as I say, when I modified the B25 frame, I had to swing this back and down to go sort of down the front of the cylinders and inside the pipes. I don't know if I'll have to do that this time, but I'm not going to weld that on and then find I can't get the pipes on. So basically that's going to be about the last piece of the frame we make, because the engine's going to be in before I even look at that. So, let's say if we don't put the gusset plates on, this and this are all the same diameter, so they'll lay down completely flat. Now, as you see, we have to do an angle here of 103 degrees. Now, I'm not going to try and hit that exactly, because the same as here, I want this to be 24 degrees, but that's when it's standing. Right, the headstock angle is a compromise to a certain extent. What you're actually doing is we're saying 24 degrees plus or minus. Because when it's standing there, we've got it 24 degrees, great. As soon as a rider gets on, the front and rear suspension are not going to go down the same amount, so the headstock angle is going to change a little bit. And if he's 10 stone, you know, 140 pound, it won't change as much as if he's, what, 13 stone, 180 pound. And similarly, when you're going, if you've got to manoeuvre when you're going uphill and the weight is on the back of the engine, the front end's going to be slightly light, the angle will change, and going downhill, the angle will change the other way. And that's why you'll hear people talking about bikes and they'll say, you know, it's great, except perhaps when you're going down something steep, the front end tucks in if you try to steer, and so on. So what we're doing here is we're saying something like, okay, 24 degrees. It'll work well between 22 and 26. But if we made it 26, then actually it would be working between 24 and 28. So for the first couple of degrees of change, it would work fine. And then, as I say, maybe the end tucks in, maybe the end gets too light, who knows. So we're going to aim as close as we can for 103 here. And what I've done is I've made a little fixture, because I was thinking my horizontal bandsaw, for instance, is a bit of a cheeky one. I can't set it to cut that angle perfectly. So it was going to have to be done by hand. And I got thinking about it. So what I did was, let me pull you out slightly. I made this. Just a piece of scrap box section. Now, this angle here is, whatever's half of that, 51.5 degrees, because that's the mitre. So this is 2-inch box section, 1/8-inch wall, so the hole inside is 1 3/4. So I'll put the tube in, I'll clamp it, and then I can use this as a guide, go down and cut my 2 mitres. So let's do that. I'll tell you what we'll do before we do anything. Look, see, that's 23 degrees to the headstock from this vertical. Let's go and have a quick check that that's going to be all right. Right, now I've stood a piece of tube up. It's probably a little bit further back, maybe half an inch than it's actually going to be. That's roughly where the engine is. But that is about right for the swinging arm. So that's marked at 16.5 inches, which is round about where we want to be. So from here to here should be around 23. Let's have a little look. That's going to be big. This is bigger tube. So it's going to be up there. There's 23. As I say, that's going to be a bit near the engine. So that dimension's fine. I think we can go fine with the 23 here and the 16.5 there. This one I'll cut a bit long, but this one will cut to 23 when we put the headstock on. Now I've measured this at 23.5 to give me a little bit of leeway at the other end. You know, this vice is playing up now. It won't tighten up on the swivel part. I've got to find myself one without a swivel. Alright, let me clean this up and then we'll check the angle. Alright, there it is. I've got these two with some blocks just holding them in place, and actually this thing is metallic, is magnetic. So there it is, clamped on there nicely, 103 degrees. I think Charlie's drawing on his website says 103.5, so half a degree. That little fixture worked a treat. That really made it easy. So what I'm going to do now is, this piece here is the 23.5 inch one, so I'm going to cut this piece to about 18 inches to give me plenty of space, and then I'll clean it up and weld it. I'm going to TIG weld this because round here it would be fine to bronze it, because I have somewhere for the bronze to actually stick to, but once I get round here there's virtually nothing. And don't forget, we are going to have a nice gusset plate on either side. So as I say, let me cut this piece, clean it up, and then I'll weld it. Now then, as you can see, I've put the barrels and the head and a rocker box on here so I can see how big that is, and I put the swinging arm in, set everything up. I'm glad I did, because I found two things that I've had to modify. Well, one I've had to modify, one I'm glad I noticed. So let me bring you in closer and I'll tell you what I found. When I first looked at these yokes in the stem, I thought it was a pair of sort of ordinary type forks with the actual stanchion and the stem parallel, but they're not. They are offset yokes. So what I find is, go on, settle down. This is basically 24 degrees, which is what I want to set them at. But when I go up here, I don't think you'll be able to see this, but it's reading 22.55. So the reason I needed to know that was, when we get round to it, to working these out, I've got to work out the angle that this tube is going to be at. And I was going to set it at 24, but it's not. It's only, as you see, 22.55. So that's one thing. The other thing was a bit more work involved. Right, it might be difficult for me to show you this without getting in the way, but when I first welded this up at my 103 degrees and I put it on there with this vertical, the tube was right down here. So I fiddled around, and at first I thought I'd got a little bit of numerical dyslexia, because what I actually did to find out was, I cut through the weld, just left it welded there so that I could move this around, and I found it was around 112, and I thought, God, did I read 103 and it should have been 113. So rather than do anything more at that point, I left it for the day, and I went and checked that it was 103, which it was. But I also noticed, looking at a couple of photographs of the Triumph Otters and the BSA Otters, actually, we came to the thing I was talking about yesterday, about that sort of era in trials when ground clearance was king, if you like. And I noticed that the engine was a lot higher. I mean, a lot higher. I had it set at about 10 inches of ground clearance. You could see that the bottom of the engine was level with the wheel spindles, which is 13. Well, I didn't want it that high because, as I say, I wanted the weight a little bit lower down. But what I have done is I've lifted it up about an inch or so. Maybe fractionally more than an inch. Just a couple of pieces of spare wood I had. Where are we? It's an inch and a quarter higher than I had it. But I still found that I was down here and I want to be up there. So as I say, I cut through this so that I could adjust it, and I found that round about 106 degrees was right. Because the other thing was, I could have kept it at 103, but the frame would have been sort of right up here, the frame top tube. So I wanted a bit more of an angle. I didn't want too high a seat height. So what I've done is I've put some wood in here. I don't think you can see the wood, just to get me roughly where that's going to sit. See, I can actually hold that like that now. And as I say, I don't know if I'll get in the way here. But if we put that on there, we'll get it to 0, which is just where I want it to be, just underneath where the bearing cup will be. Let's move to get on it. Where are we? There. Right? Can you see up here? It's just underneath the bearing. So that's spot on. Now the other thing I want to check, which I haven't done yet, hang on a second while I get my tape measure. Right, put this down. Here's what we're going to do for seat height, because I'd like the seat rails to come to the top here. But anyway, so that goes to about there. That goes like that. And we have got, wow, 33 inches. I'm going to have to... These forks are 30 inches long, which is exactly the same length as the BSA ones. Oh God, I don't want to have to cut that and re-weld it again. Why is that so high? 33 inches. I want it down around 3. You can see there's an enormous gap here. See, I could almost do with having this. See, it should be more like that. But you can see how far out it is then. I think I'm going to have to redo this angle. See, that should be 16 inches to there. Now this I made a couple of inches long. Let me get some more blocks of wood and things and do some more looking at it. That puts the seat, if I have the seat here, 30 inches. But you can see what the angle wants to be, and there's still loads of room above the engine. I don't know how much I'm going to get done this week, because I think I'll have to phone Charlie and tell him that the dimension, well, this dimension is right. It's still going to be, well, that's even less. Yeah, no, 23. That dimension is about right, but this, which to the bottom of here should be 16 and an eighth. That white mark is 16 and an eighth. So we're 3 or 4 inches out there. Now, 14. I've already welded that thing up twice. I guess the only thing to do is cut through it again, open it out. It's going to end up at 13 degrees. Bet you any money. Hold on a second. This is 113 degrees. See? I was going to make it that, and then I moved the engine and fiddled around and thought, no, 106 will do. Oh, lunch and more thinking. Right now,
Whilst I was drinking my cup of Yorkshire tea and eating my toasted cheese and Branston pickle sandwich, I thought a bit, and what I've decided to do is we're going to make a sort of amalgam of the two things. We're going to make an Otter designed bike, but I'm going to change a couple of the dimensions to have it more the way I want it to be, because I looked at a load of photographs, and yes, the BSAs as well as the Triumphs, the engine's high up. There's a couple of things that I don't think suit modern trials. So what I've done is I remade this to be 113 degrees. Well, this is actually 56.5, and I've recut these, and it just struck me, I don't think I showed you exactly how I set this up. Hang on. It's 70 degrees, I've got the doors open. So all I've done is I've got this up against a good solid block with one of those nice little foldy up magnet things and everything holding that there. Then what I've done is put this onto there to make sure if that face is completely vertical, then I'm right. Then we're going to put that there. Do exactly the same here with blocks. Then I'm going to tack it. This time I'm going to try it out, and then if everything's fine, we'll weld it up. And I did notice when I welded the last one, even though I tacked it and everything, the angle did change a little bit. When I did the first one, it changed half a degree. It went from the 103 to 102.5, and the same when I did the second time, when I set it to 106, it came out at 105.5. So I'm thinking that I must have started here, and as that contracted, it pulled it in a little bit. So we'll tack it, and then we'll weld at this point here, and then we'll weld under here. So I don't know whether it's going to work having the door open. Anyway, let me get this tacked, and then we'll see what it looks like on the bike. Here we go, the moment of truth. I've got my tape ready to measure the seat height. Okay, now what I've done is I've dropped this end down a little bit, the wood it was standing on. This is one of the dimensions that's going to be different. So it's standing on a piece of wood right there. There's 0, and my head's not in the way. You can see it's just underneath that bearing. Changed again, there we go. Just underneath the bearing. Right, and I have a little bit to play with at the bottom, so I can always... So that's going to be about there, and that's going to give us a seat height. Well, it's going to give us the top of the tube is 30 inches. We can have the seat slightly lower, and actually that also, I just checked, is nice. Let me put that way. When the seat rails are on there, that's just the right height for the 14-inch set of units that I'm going to get. So that's good. Right, let me weld this. Right then, took a little more care when I was welding to make sure I didn't get anything. 113.0. Right. Now, as I say, this end, the bottom, which you can't see, is a little lower. It's going to be slightly shorter than the dimensions on Charlie's website. So come on, go the right way, Michael. What are you doing? Zero. And we're just, come on, just below the bearing. Now I can actually raise this up slightly. Oh, it doesn't need to go up, 1/4 of an inch, that's all. We'll see that when we've got the get that off. And now make sure I'm still right with this. $29.5 or thereabouts. So that's great. That's exactly right. Now then, we're good for this 23 inches for the length. That actually comes forward a little bit to give us room there. Actually, I think I'll make it a little bit longer, because as we've put that angle there, all that geometry stuff, the distance from there to there is greater when the angle's greater. So we'll make it just about 1/2 an inch, something like that. So now what we're going to do is we're going to mitre this a bit, not mitre it, sorry, whatever the word is. Get our bird's mouth thing for the headstock. So let's go over to the welding table and I'll show you something about that. So we've got our seat pillar and our top tube set. So the next thing to do is to put on the headstock. Now, as I mentioned, I've used 3/4 for all of these, because that way we can just build it laid out on the bench here. This is 16th wall, this is 8th wall, because we're going to make the bearing carriers, and the bearing carriers will be made out of this, because this is 1 3/4 ID, so it just goes on there, and then it's a nice thickness that the bearing is just slightly more than 1 3/4. So it'll turn that out a little bit and everything will be fine for the outer race. Now, we need to set this at the right angle. We want this to be 24 degrees. Well, no we don't. We want this to be 22.5. If this is 22.5 because the stem is in there, then the forks will be at 24 degrees. So we need to know this angle here. So here's how we're going to do that. A little bit more geometry. I've done more geometry the last couple of weeks than I have since I was at school. Alright, we have got our seat pillar and we have got our top tube, and now we want to put on the headstock, right? So we know that this angle here is 113 degrees. So this angle here, because that is 180, must be 67 degrees. Right? Now a parallel line through there would mean that this angle is going to be 67. Right? To get it as vertical, and we know we want to be 24 degrees or 22.5 degrees out of the vertical. So it's going to be, that's going to be 22.5. That's going to be 22.5 plus 67, which is 89.5 degrees. So it's almost right angled. You may remember that when I do the B25s, that's almost a right angle. On there, it's a very slight angle. So what we'll do, because we've got to do this by hand, is I'm just going to do that 90 degrees. When I cut this piece here, I'm going to do it as if it's 90 degrees, and then we can just ease it with a file to make it the other bit if we need to. We'll put it on, see how it goes, and what have you. Now this, the cope, that's the word I was looking for before. This cope here, or as it's called, the bird mouth, because of the way it looks, that's going to be like that slightly, see, to fit around the tube. I actually bought a tube notcher. I bought it from the same place that I got the tube bender, really nice big heavy duty one, and wouldn't you know it, they're having delivery problems, it hasn't arrived yet, so we're going to have to do that by hand. But fortunately, as it's only 90 degrees, what I might do is just stick it in the mill, do it at 90 degrees with the 1 3/4 inch hole saw, and then just fine tune it after that. Okay, so let us now find out how long we need this to be. Just thought I'd do a quick little experiment here. I've set the sort of seat pillar tube at vertical. Oh, see, we're less than a degree out. We want it to be 22.5, it's 23.4, and that wants to go that way slightly. Okay, so I'll do this at 90 degrees, just a little bit proud of the mark, and then we can just file it very slightly and we should be able to get our 22.5 easily enough. Right, we've got our bearings here on the stock, so that one's going to go in there. So the tube, the headstock tube, needs to be from there to there, and then the bearing carriers go on the outside. So that is 5 1/16. Still can't get in close, but that's what it is, 5 1/16. Okay, now we'll make it that size, and if we're slightly out, we can always put a little washer underneath or something like that. So 5 1/16. So I've got this set up in the mill. It's in the vise here, that's perfectly level. That's up against an angle plate, all clamped up, so that's vertical. Not only did I check that was vertical there, but let me zoom you in. See that line there? When this was laid flat, this is 1 3/4. I measured up 7/8, drew that line, and then that was my nice rough guide. I just put that on there, put a square on it. Will the square go up there? Yep. Made sure it was about that, and then used the level on the other end. So it's level all round. The back piece is vertical, this piece is level. We're all set up, marked to place for our hole saw. Now, if any of you are wondering why I didn't just set that and then angle the head with a hole saw, it's a very good reason. This head isn't a swivel head, so I can't change it. Alright, if my nice tube notcher was here, it would have been easy. So we'll do this at 90 degrees and then we'll see how we've got to work on it. Okay, safety glasses, there they are. Oil, there it is. And we'll probably have to slow this down a bit. Okay. What happened there? I've got everything tightened up. The little things are in there, they're in. That's tight. Still on our mark on the DRO. This is a brand new bloody saw, would you believe? Why is that waggling? down even more. Working around the camera, that's the problem here. But it is at least cutting now. Right, well, not impressed with that whole saw. Get the fan, clean it up and see what it looks like. However, I can't complain about the fit. That's perfect. No wobble, nothing. Alright. Right then, I've set this up in the vise with the seat pillar vertical. I say that made quite a nice joint, didn't it? So let's see how we came out with this. 23.1, God, we're looking for what? 22.55. So we've got to make it go in a little bit at the bottom. So what we're going to do that with is this. So I'm going to turn you off because it'll be incredibly noisy. In fact, I've got to get my little earplugs. Right, and let's see what we've got. $22.5. I'm going to leave it at that because, you know, with these you can play around for ages. Hang on, settle down. There, 22.5. Okay, next stage. Right, well, there's our headstock tube. I've marked it at a 1/2 inch because that's where the sleeve for the upper bearing is going to be. So we'll put that there. I've got this laid out flat. Like that. Okay, and we'll just give it a quick tap and then check that everything is square, and then we'll go and try it on the bike. Alright, there it is. I've just sat it on the bearing. It's about right there, and this is actually reading 0. You know, we've got a little bit of play in this. So that's good. Right, let me go and bronze this. It's actually late-ish on Saturday because I was busy this week. So I'll certainly get that bronzed, and I might make the plates here. We'll see how things go. Well, there's that bronzed on there, and while that was cooling I made up a template to go on this back piece. Let me show you that. So this is going to go on there like that, get bronzed on. I might curve it a little bit. So I'll cut 2 pieces out in metal, both the same, and we'll get those bronzed on, and that's definitely all I'll get done this week. Alright, well, I put them on, there's one on each side, bronzed on. A little bit hot in a couple of places. I nibbled, there look. You see the difference in the colour of the bronze? And I nibbled the edge. But they're fine, so that's that done. Right then, next week we'll make the 2 can you see that? Sort of. Whoops. We'll make the 2 pieces that go on there, that the outer race of the taper roller bearing will go in. One for the top, one for the bottom. They'll get put on and bronzed on. As I said, this bottom tube we'll leave until last. So once we've got them on, we will put this onto the jig, and then we're going to do the box for the swinging arm mount. Alright, so that's it for this week. You all stay safe and enjoy yourselves.